I'm going to show you how to make a very simple, very quick change in your Serum 2 patch to take a sound like this to something that sounds like this. This is a pretty CPU intensive trick, so just be aware of that. This is the patch that I have set up. Without getting bogged down in all the details of it, the part that you need to understand is that it has a granular oscillator. It's going to scroll a little bit through this sample, which is just a quick arpeggiated chord that I did, and you get something like this. The key to this sound is turning up the unison on your granular oscillator and then doing a little tweak under the section called spawn pattern. So if I boost the unison to 7 voices, as a heads up, this is the part that will really become CPU intensive, because if you have a granular oscillator that's generating a bunch of tiny little grains, and then you turn the unison up on that, you're multiplying the number of grains that Serum 2 has to generate by the number of unison voices that you have. That's just where you can get really CPU intensive really fast, so just be aware of that. But the key part of the sound is under this section called spawn pattern. If you have a regular like wavetable oscillator or a sample oscillator that's in unison mode, it's just going to spawn 7, in this case, detuned unique copies of that oscillator. With a granular oscillator, you actually have a few more options in terms of how that works. So it can either do what it's currently doing, which is the together mode, which is where it's going to do more or less what it would do with a wavetable or a sample synth and spawn all of the individual grains together. But if you switch it to even mode, what it's going to do is it'll spawn a bunch of the grains, and then in between the time where it would normally spawn the next set of grains, it'll spawn the other set of grains from the other unison voices. I know that's a bit tricky, but it's easier to kind of hear the effect, I think, than it is for me to try to explain it. But when I switch to even, you're going to hear almost a wobble as one set of voices gets spawned, and then there's a gap, and then another set, and they alternate back and forth. And the factor that affects sort of how long that wobble is back and forth is actually this length parameter, so how long the grains are. And since I have some automation on that on my patch, that's partly what's giving it that whoop, 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 whoop kind of swing. And then when you throw that wobbly, swingy rhythm in with the other elements, the percussion and the bass and whatnot, I find it really works nice. So yeah, like I said, that is a CPU intensive trick. You do tend to need to have like 7 or more. There's kind of a sweet spot of unison voices where you really start to hear the effect more prominently. So yeah, highly recommend that. You should try it out sometime.